Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, the Past and Future of Oil. My name is Desiree Littman, and I'm the Program and Marketing Assistant here at Times Journeys. We're also joined today by Sewell Chan, International News Editor in the Times London Bureau, and the expert on October Tour, and Rami Girgis, Product Manager for Private Jet and Special Interest Travel at Abercrombie & Kent. During this webinar, you'll learn more about our trip to Saudi Arabia, where you'll get an inside look at how oil transformed the Arabian Peninsula and hear perspectives from oil industry and government officials. But before we begin, why travel with the New York Times? Firstly, each of our small group tours and cruises is joined by a New York Times journalist or subject matter specialist. Each of our experts will educate and inspire you and is there to add insight and perspective to your tour. Choose from our program of over 50 itineraries, including land-based trips and specialist cruises on world-renowned cruise lines. We visit destinations that tell a story, exploring everything from their arts and culture to history and politics. Lastly, when you travel with the Times, you can escape the crowds and enjoy exclusive access to attractions normally closed to the public. So now I'll take you through a quick overview of the tour. Your journey begins in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia's second largest city. Take in the cultural and historic sites during days 1 and 2 of your tour. On day 3, fly to Medina and then drive through the stunning desert landscapes to reach Al Ula. You'll stay in this ancient oasis through day 4. On day 5, drive to Hale. Spend time touring the city, then fly to Riyadh, where you'll be for another day. On day 7 of your journey will be spent exploring the old city of Diriyah before you fly to Dammam. You'll spend day 8 in Dammam and then board a flight to Abu Dhabi in the afternoon. On day 9, explore Abu Dhabi, the seat of the United Arab Emirates. And on day 10, you'll transfer to the airport for your flights home. Included in the price of the tour are all accommodations, your tour manager and local guides, transfers, and most meals. During the tour, you'll visit important historical sites, such as the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Al Balad, which is recognized as the gate to Mecca. Explore the Madain Saleh, Saudi Arabia's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. You'll tour Musma Castle, one of the most important landmarks in Riyadh. And you'll visit the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, one of the largest mosques in the world. This journey is full of incredible opportunities to get an inside look at the history and culture of this country. You'll visit Dammam, Saudi Arabia's largest Persian Gulf port, to gain insight into the history and future of oil. You'll get to meet with a Saudi journalist and discuss some of the challenges facing the region, and you'll learn about the birth of Islam, Wahhabism, and the nation of Saudi Arabia. So now I'm delighted to introduce Sewell Chan, who, as I mentioned earlier, will be joining our October departure for this tour. Sewell has been the international news editor for the Times London Bureau since September 2015. His focus has been breaking news in the Middle East, Europe, and Africa, and he has helped lead coverage of major news stories, including the migration wave triggered by turmoil in the Middle East. Amongst other roles, he was previously the deputy editor of the op-ed pages and Sunday Review section at the Times. Sewell, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here, Desiree.
So Sewell, do you want to talk a little bit about why you're joining this tour, your background, and then discuss a few of the topics you'll speak on during the tour?
Absolutely. I'm really thrilled about this, and I need to begin, however, with a confession. While I'm very, very excited to be a panelist in this tour, I would hardly call myself an expert. Just a little bit about my background, because one of the things that excites me most about this tour is the opportunity to learn from Times readers, who are really the heart and soul of what makes the New York Times what we are. I've been at this organization for about 13 years after coming to the New York Times from the Washington Post. And my previous experience in the Middle East directly has been fairly limited. 2004, I helped when I was at the Washington Post to cover what was then the early stage of the Iraq War, and I was based in Baghdad for about 4 months, and also spent some time in Kuwait, Jordan, And over the years, I've also just as a tourist been to Israel and Turkey, but I've never actually been to the Persian Gulf or to Saudi Arabia. Thrilled to have this opportunity. I think there's a difference between the learning that comes from reading and even editing stories and working with correspondents who are based in these locations. And that's different from actually experiencing through one's own eyes and ears the look and feel of a place. So I'm really thrilled about that. I think one of the reasons I'm especially excited to be on this tour as well is that we're obviously in a time of immense geopolitical change when some of the most basic assumptions about US policy and America's role in the world have been thrown into question. And I think if you're trying to look a little bit calmly, a little bit dispassionately about foreign policy over the years, one of the constants actually in U.S. policy has been kind of a close alliance with Saudi Arabia, and that takes place on the military level and it's a diplomatic level, security level. But I think one of the big questions that will be coming up quite soon, if not already, is the nature of that alliance during an era, of the Trump administration and of immense flux and uncertainty about America's posture in the Middle East. And while that's not the only framework, of course, for thinking about the Gulf states, it's certainly one of the questions I imagine we'd engage with on this tour.
Great, thank you. Sounds like your background is really going to add a lot of perspective to the tour. Do you want to speak a little bit about the lecture topics you will cover during the trip?
I'm sure. I definitely, as plan to talk and engage with the tour participants in a look at what it means for the states of the Gulf to try to adapt their economies and become more resilient, more diversified, more tourist friendly, actually, as part of it as well, in a world where complete reliance on one natural resource, especially one that is not renewable, is certainly going to be part of the future, and that's obviously a big economic and macroeconomic question for the entire region. A second topic, of course, will be the geopolitics, looking at the impact of the regional or proxy battle going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran, one that has been played out in countries as diverse as Syria and Yemen, and certainly a regional rivalry that also affects Israel-Palestine, a subject that's obviously very much in the news. Related to that, we'd be looking also at what came out of the epical period of 2011 to 2015 in so many of the countries of the Arab world, and whether or not the promise of the democratic aspirations that were expressed in terms of street protests and demonstrations in many countries, including some in the Gulf like Bahrain, whether those aspirations have been permanently dashed, whether and how they've been kind of used or co-opted or deployed by the political interests in these countries, and what the future of those aspirations holds. And then finally, I would like to take a look at this very momentous time for American journalism, at how the news industry itself is changing, how it's both responding to the changing environment economically, with the move to digital and a move away from advertising towards an ever-increasing reliance on our subscribers as the primary source of our revenue. And then related to that, these bigger questions that actually have come up really even in the short time since this tour began to be planned about so-called fake news, about the role of journalism in preserving democracy, and about questions about whether the truth itself is knowable, and what role it plays in a democratic society and in a democratic system of government.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you so much. Excited to have you joining this tour, and I think everyone's going to really learn a lot while traveling with you. So we are also joined today by Rami Girgis from our tour operator Abercrombie & Kent. Rami joined A&K in 2005, handling travel in North Africa and the Middle East. As the product manager for private jet and special interest travel, Rami focuses on developing and growing the Asia product and planning itineraries that include exclusive events paired with authentic meals. We're very pleased to have him here today to take us through this incredible itinerary. Rami, over to you.
Thank you very much, Desiree. It's really a wonderful opportunity to talk to you today about a destination that's not on many travelers' radar. It's a very unique destination in its own right. We're going to go off the beaten track to see some of the most iconic sites in Saudi Arabia, but we'll also shed some much needed light on the oil conundrum, as Sewell mentioned earlier. We will see and talk to people in Saudi Arabia, which is a country that has and continues to rely on oil, and contrast that when we travel to the Emirates, which is where we end our journey. It's a nation that has also made its wealth from oil, yet it's taken a completely different approach. They do realize that oil is not sustainable and certainly not the future, and they've taken different steps to diversify the economy. Oil is not the only thing, and sites are not the only thing. We'll also learn about Islam, and not only Islam, we'll learn about the Saudi form of Islam, which is the Wahhabi movement and the Wahhabi form of practice. It is among the most strict in Islam. We'll learn how, when, and why it's being adopted by the kingdom. I'm going to start with day one, and our trip starts in Jeddah. And to make it easy for you, there are many airlines that fly into Jeddah with reasonable connection times, such as British Airways, Qatar Airways, Turkish Airlines, and Etihad. Now, Etihad is a good option because the trip ends in Abu Dhabi, which is the Etihadi hub for the airline. So it's a really good option for you as well. There's only one direct flight into Jeddah from JFK. It's on Saudi Airlines, but they do not serve alcohol on the flight. So it's just something to keep in mind. On day one, we just arrive and get some rest and adjust to the time difference, and we transfer to our hotel in Jeddah, the Intercontinental Jeddah. The Intercontinental Jeddah overlooks the Red Sea, and it's really well located, about 15 minutes away from the old town of Jeddah. So we'll get some time to adjust the jet lag, and on day two, we start our expedition. So we go out to discover Al-Balad. Al-Balad, like I said, it's the old town of Jeddah. We're going to see the old houses that were constructed from coral and reinforced with wooden beams. We go afterwards to Nasif House. Nasif House was built back in the 1850s, but why go there? Well, it's home to the Nasif family, which hosted King Abdulaziz. King Abdulaziz was the first monarch and the founder of Saudi Arabia, and he spent his first night in Jeddah in this house. We go back to the hotel to freshen up, and tonight's dinner will be joined by a guest speaker to talk to us about the discovery of oil in the kingdom and the transformation of a desert-dwelling nation into a very advanced country. On day three, it's basically a travel day. We're going to transfer to the airport and fly to Medina. Our flight is about 1 hour. As soon as we arrive, we're going to drive 3 hours to a small town called Al-Ula. And Al-Ula, why drive 3 hours to go Al-Ula? We'll find out the next day. But basically, we're going to stay at a 3-star resort and to be able to explore an amazing site, which is called Madain Saleh. We arrive at Al-Ula, we spend the night, and on day 4, we start going out to discover. So we drive 30 minutes to Madain Saleh. Madain Saleh is Saudi Arabia's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, think of it as Jordan's Petra without any crowds. That's what it is. Madain Saleh dates back to about 500 BC, and it was a stopover on a very prosperous trade route. It's also was considered the last and the southernmost stop for the Nabateans and the Nabatean settlement after Petra. It's an amazing site, massive, so many structures. So we're going to spend the day there visiting some of those different structures, tombs and inner chambers. Again, it's one of the most amazing things about this place is the lack of crowds. So there's a very good chance that you will be the only people on site. We'll also stop to see the Hijaz Railway, which dates back to the Ottoman times, and it was built so that it can connect Constantinople with Medina and Mecca, so it can ease the way for the Hajj, or the Muslim pilgrimage. We go back to our hotel, and on day 5, we will drive east to Hayel. Hayel province, that's where we see the Arif Fort. The Arif Fort dates back to the 11th century, and we're going to visit the fort and transfer directly to the airport from there to fly on to Riyadh. And Riyadh is, as you know, it is the capital of Saudi Arabia. And our hotel tonight will be the Intercontinental Riyadh. The hotel is also very well located, just 5 minutes away from the city center. And there's a golf course for those that are really interested in playing a round of golf. We'll get some rest, and on day 6, we go out to explore the city. So we'll start out with the Musmak Castle. Musmak Castle is one of the most important and historical landmarks in the city. It's located right in the heart of Riyadh. The palace was built in 1895, and it used to be a military garrison for Abdullah bin Rashid's army, who was at the time operating under the governor of Riyadh. Now, King Abdulaziz captured this fort in 1902 during his conquest of Riyadh. After this, we go to have lunch, and our lunch today will be a very traditional lunch. We'll sit on cushions on the floor and eat a Saudi-style meal, as they call it, a majlis. Then we go out to see the National Museum. This national landmark consists of 8 galleries, and it tells pretty much the complete story of the Arabian history from the creation of the universe to the modern era. We'll end the day at Murabba Palace, which was built by King Abdulaziz, also outside the walls of Riyadh. And it used to be his private accommodation and his evening office in the 1930s. After touring, we'll go back to the hotel, freshen up, and then we're going to meet a journalist, a Saudi journalist, who will talk to us about the challenges facing the region from a Saudi perspective. On day 7, we'll go out to explore the city of Diriyah. And the city of Diriyah is about 12 miles from the main city, or the main heart of Riyadh. It's also one of the most important sites of the Saudi dynasty. We'll take a break for lunch afterwards, and then we are going to go out and do something completely different. So we're going to go out and visit a camel market. But not just a camel market, this is the Middle East's largest and most authentic camel market. So we'll see people selling and haggling for pricing and taking camels home. It's a very unique experience. I've traveled extensively throughout the Middle East, and I can tell you that this is a very real experience, very authentic. Our hotel will transfer to the airport and fly to the Dammam right afterwards, and our hotel will be the Sheraton Dammam Hotel. Sheraton Dammam Hotel is the best hotel in Dammam. It has beautiful views of the Arabian Gulf, and we'll enjoy these views also from our rooms. Day 8 is another exciting day. Now, this is not just an exciting day from a historical perspective, but also from a learning perspective. Madain Saleh is my favorite day, and this is my second favorite day. On this day, we'll gain insight into the history and future of Saudi Arabia. So we're going to visit Aramco, which is the world's top producer for oil. There's a huge exhibit there on site that showcases Aramco's work from exploration, drilling, and production to the refining and shipping of oil. So it's a very educational experience and an eye-opener. This is not a site that just anyone can go and visit. It's a site that we get a special permit to go and visit. Right next to it, we'll also pay a visit to the King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, which was meant to be built at the heart of the oil fields, and it's been central to the formation and development of the kingdom. We spend one night in Dammam, and after visiting Aramco and the King Abdulaziz Center, we drive to the airport and fly into the Emirates. And as soon as we arrive, we're going to arrive into Abu Dhabi. We're going to transfer to the hotel to freshen up. And tonight, we will get to enjoy and toast our journey with a glass of wine. And I did not mention wine or any alcoholic drinks in Saudi Arabia because it's forbidden. Importation and consumption of alcohol is completely forbidden in Saudi Arabia. But here, we'll be able to toast our journey for the first time with a glass of wine over dinner. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, has adopted, while conservative, but still a more liberal form of Islam, where you can drink and enjoy yourself. Yet, like I said, it's a conservative. We're still in the Middle East and still very conservative. And we'll be talking about the dress code later on in the webinar. On day 9, we go out to start exploring Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. We'll start with the Grand Mosque, which was named after His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. He was the late president of the United Arab Emirates. And this mosque in particular, it's gorgeous. The chandeliers, the carpeting, the whole structure is amazing. And the crystals, it is a sight to see and very unique. This mosque in particular is the largest, or one of the largest mosques in the Middle East. It can accommodate 30,000 worshippers at the same time. After seeing the glamour of the mosque, we're going to go out and see Heritage Village. So here we're going to step back in time a little bit to see what life was like in the United Arab Emirates before the discovery of oil. We'll make a brief stop at Al Hosn Palace, which was known as the Old Fort or the White Fort. It's the oldest building in Abu Dhabi, and it used to be the palace and the residence of the ruling family of Abu Dhabi. And then later is something very exciting that I am keeping my fingers crossed that we will be able to see, which is the World of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. The World of the Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum, the opening date for it has been delayed several times over the years. It is expected to open sometime in 2017, and we're praying for it. It's located on Saadiyat Island. It's meant to be an amazing place, 260,000 square feet in its size, and the only one of its kind outside Paris. I'll definitely keep you posted on the inauguration date, and hopefully we'll be able to visit. If not, we'll substitute it with a different site. Now, early this evening, we're going to meet another guest speaker who will talk to us about the United Arab Emirates' vision for the future that relies less on oil and more on economic diversification. Our journey comes to a close tonight, and we say goodbyes. It's our farewell dinner with the guest speaker, and the next day will be our last day, and it's basically after breakfast we'll provide a private transfer to the airport. Just a reminder that in Abu Dhabi you need to go a little bit earlier when we transfer you to the airport, because you actually clear customs and immigrations, U.S. customs and immigrations in Abu Dhabi. So when you arrive in the U.S., it's a very easy arrival, just like a domestic flight, where you proceed directly to the baggage carousel and off you go. No need to do that again. It's all done in Abu Dhabi. And this is the end of our journey. With this, I will turn it over to Desiree.
Thank you, Rami, for taking us through that journey. So it sounds really incredible, from archaeological sites in the desert to mosques and camel markets. This is really going to be a unique experience, I'm sure. So now I'll just cover off some frequently asked questions, and then we can open it up to any questions that you have. So firstly, is international airfare included? Our prices do not include this, since we found that guests often prefer to use air miles. What documentation will you need to travel? Well, you'll need a valid passport, and the tour operator will assist you in any visas or travel documents that you'll need for your trip. What are the physical requirements for the tour? We generally recommend that you are able to walk for 3 hours unaided. And what should you pack? So before your departure, you'll be provided with a detailed packing list. And Rami, I know you briefly mentioned the dress code earlier on. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So Saudi Arabia is, like I said, it's Middle East, it's conservative, but also it's not very strict for foreigners as it is for locals. So, for instance, women should observe that strict Saudi dress code and wear conservative, loose-fitting clothes. And what I would recommend is to wear what they call abaya, which is a full-length cloak over your clothes, and keep a scarf with you just in case. You do not need to cover your hair at all times, but in case you're asked to by the religious police, you have it handy and you just put it on. But you are not required to wear it at all times. For men, no need to cover their hair, but just to keep in mind, no shorts are allowed in public. Short sleeved shirts are not preferred, although you can wear them in many cases, but we do not recommend them. T-shirts and polo shirts are acceptable. That's really it in a nutshell. So it's just loose. We need to cover arms and legs at all times, and we'll be perfectly fine.
Thank you. And Rami, do you also want to talk quickly about the visa process that travelers might have to go through for this tour?
Sure. So the Saudi government has a bit of a different way to get your visa. We need to get the authorization for the visa beforehand, and we do that through our offices on the ground in Riyadh. As soon as we get the authorization, we'll direct you to a visa provider that we work with. They're called Pinnacle. And they will provide you with the visa application and the other consular forms. Just quickly, what basically you will need is one passport photograph and 2 copies of your passport, color clear copies, photocopies of your passport, and obviously the actual passport. One thing to keep in mind that if there are married couples traveling and are sharing a room, they will need to provide also a certified copy of their marriage certificate, and the visa fees, as well as the visa handling fees, as well as the consular fees.
Thank you.
Sure.
So lastly, should I be concerned about my safety in Saudi Arabia? So Rami, I don't know if you want to address that one, since you probably know a little bit more.
Sure. The Saudi government is very, very strict on safety and security, especially for expats. There are thousands of expats, as you can imagine, that are working in the oil industry from the U.S. and from many other European countries. There's never been an issue with Western expats being targeted, nor travelers to the kingdom that are going for leisure. And like I said, they keep a really tight grip on security. We advise them of all our movements, our itinerary, day by day. So they keep a close eye on us. But otherwise, we should be fine traveling.
Great, thank you. So now we'll open it up for any questions you might have. In the webinar panel on the right hand of your screen, you'll see a place to type in any questions. So now I'll just take a look. So someone's asked, to what extent will we be able to interact with everyday Saudi citizens?
This is a really good question. Thank you. You will be able to. I mean, we have locals that will be traveling with us. We have our tour director who will be traveling with us from beginning to end while in Saudi, and another one in the Emirates. So there will be plenty of opportunities to chat with him about life in the kingdom. There will also be opportunities as we're traveling through the markets. The Saudi people are very friendly. A lot of them are Western educated, so there'll be ample opportunities to discuss with them life in Saudi Arabia and challenges and things like that.
Great. So someone has asked here, do you have a recommended reading list? And we do. It's available on our website on the trip page. So you can check there and see what reading will help enhance your trip. So someone wants to know a little bit more about the dress code specifically for women.
Okay, sure. So, like I said, the most important thing is that we do not attract attention, and while we do not have to dress like the locals do in terms of covering our faces and our hair, we do have to observe the conservative form. In other words, just to be clear, women can wear trousers, loose-fitting shirts or T-shirts, as long as the arms are covered. You do not need to wear gloves to cover your hands, nor need to wear socks at all times to cover your feet, although on some days it will be recommended because of walking in the sand. As long as our legs are covered, no short skirts, no shirts should be worn at that time. Also, like I said, you do not have to cover your hair. Like if you've been to Iran, it's a requirement that you cover your hair when you go to Iran. In Saudi Arabia, it's a little different. It's okay to go out with your hair exposed, but my advice is to keep a scarf with you in your a scarf or something to cover your hair with in your purse, just in case you're asked to by the religious police during that time. Um, Skirts are fine, pants are fine as long as they're all the way down below the knee.
Thank you. And Sewell, we have a question here for you. So what has surprised you the most in your coverage of Saudi Arabia?
I think the thing that has struck me the most is that of all the countries in the Middle East North Africa region, it's one where American policy has been surprisingly consistent over time. I'll mention something very candidly. It's no surprise that the vast majority of the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi, and yet that did not precipitate kind of a giant change in policy toward the country. There are many reasons for that, but I think the fact that Saudi has been kind of a bedrock of U.S. policy for so long is one thing that makes it extremely interesting. I'm also very struck by the country's role, and this is a non-geopolitical comment, the country's role as kind of the guardian of the two holy mosques and therefore the custodian for two of the most sacred places in Islam. I think that's an extremely significant role and one that bears more examination at a time when the question of who speaks for Islam and for the Ummah and for the global Muslim community is a very active question right now. I would say those are perhaps the two most striking things for me.
And how do you think the political situation will play out in the Middle East in the coming months?
Oh God, if I knew. I mean, I'm sure some people on the call probably have more information on that than I do. I think U.S. policy is so in flux right now, and I think one of the many things about the very young Trump presidency is that as we all know, the president has so much more leeway in foreign affairs and national security than in domestic, arguably. And I think that's one reason why the early stumbles of this administration have raised so much concern, because I think more or less, and again, I'm being very careful here not to express opinions, but just kind of analysis. But I think most observers agree that the president has not shown a particular ideological disposition, but he's kind of a work in. He's very much in motion and very much still unformed in some ways. And basic questions like how he gets his information, where he gets it from, and who's advising him are still unformed. And I think we're going to see those changes and those dynamics continue to play out even in the months, between now and this trip, which makes it certainly a very interesting and very dynamic time to be going.
Thank you, Sewell. Rami, we have a question here that I think you can answer. So is there any issues using a passport that's been stamped for entry to Iran?
No, there shouldn't be an issue. If you have an Iranian stamp in your passport or even an Israeli stamp in the passport, the Saudi government, it used to be an issue in the past. Now it's okay. They can grant you the visa even if you have the Iranian stamp.
And just another question that's come up about if there's anything else they should know about travel in the region.
Yes, there's a lot more. I'm going to make this very brief. Saudi Arabia is not a place it's not basically a luxury vacation destination. It's a very cultural it's a very cultural destination for those that are curious about a destination and want to travel off the beaten track. But people who go there should not expect a Four Seasons or Peninsula type accommodations wherever they go. Also, the infrastructure for the tourism industry in Saudi Arabia is really in its infancy. So one needs to keep that in mind and bypass luxury for the sake of learning and traveling to a remote, unique destination such as Saudi Arabia. Also, there are some things to keep in mind that there are a lot of places segregate men and women, and sometimes they segregate singles from family. While we will not be impacted a lot on our itinerary by this, but you will see it. The segregation that will affect us is mostly at the hotels and at airports. At the hotels, for instance, the facilities such as the swimming pool or a spa, they have specific hours for men and separate hours for women. At the airport, for security, they have different lines for men and women. It's things like that that we need to keep in mind. I mentioned the alcohol earlier. Like I said, it's not permitted to consume or bring any alcohol into the country, and there are severe penalties for doing that. And the same goes for pork. Anything that contains pork in the ingredients should not be brought into the kingdom. Obviously, discussions regarding politics and religion should be avoided, except for those that we have on our itinerary. And one more thing to add to this is if there are unmarried couples traveling, they will need to book 2 separate single rooms for the Saudi Arabia portion. I think we've covered pretty much most things, but I'm here if there are any further questions.
Okay. Thank you. We'll just answer one more question and then we'll move on to wrap it up. Somebody has a question about photography in the country and if there's any issues with taking photos.
That's a really good question. There are no issues taking photos at all. And, obviously, if you're taking a photo of someone in particular, the right thing to do is just to ask for their permission. Photographing women is sensitive in Saudi Arabia, so I would avoid this, except if we're taking a picture of a public place, not without necessarily zooming in. Photographing military sites, which we're going to pass by some of them, is prohibited. Our local guides, the national guide, will be there to direct us as to which site should not be photographed and which site where we can use the camera or where not. So he'll be our guide for that in that regard. Going to the travel sites such as Madain Saleh and the forts, all of that should be perfectly fine for photography.
So now just to summarize this trip quickly, it has 2 departures in 2017, one on October 24th and the second on November 7th. This trip is limited to 24 travelers. It's a 10-day journey with a price starting at $10,995 and a single supplement of $1,595. And there is an internal air cost of $645. So if you have any other questions or would like to book your space on this tour, please call our reservation specialists at 855-698-7979, or you can visit our website. So with that, a big thank you to Sewell and Rami for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for listening in, and we hope to see you on a Times Journey soon.